stage with us, a few of them. We're going to sit down and do a little Q&A. We get some microphones for you guys.
Thank you for all staying. One thing before we begin the Q&A, we would like to remind everyone that there is a pop-up poster show and reception over in the Schwader Art Building across Asbury Avenue.
With bar,
following the Q&A.
And how about a hand for the producers of the film, Scott Montgomery, Daniel Barski. Let me introduce our panel. Sitting to my right, a guy that I'm a big fan of. He's in the Colorado Music Hall of Fame, the great Otis Taylor, everybody. Over here in the middle, from 8th Penny Matters, is Brent Warren. How about it for Brent? Next to Brent, we have Melody Wanamaker. Got most of the laughs in the film. Congratulations. And then a very interesting musician, Paul Conley from Both Out on the Hand People. So Brent, Jimi Hendrix really stole your girlfriend, huh?
you know it.
I gotta shake your hand, man. Congratulations. That's awesome.
And I'd just like to say that if anybody knows who she was, I just want her to know that I forgive her, the bitch.
Have you seen her since? Have you seen her since?
Oh, I can't even. It was the 60s. I can't even remember.
Right.
I think her name was Debbie.
And Otis is a great musician, and as I mentioned, he's in the Hall of Fame. And I didn't realize that you actually played with Jimi Hendrix. You played on stage with Jimi Hendrix. It must have been pretty amazing.
It was amazing. I want to say something before I answer the question. If you watch the video, there was a definite African American presence in the family dog.
Yeah. Yeah.
My parents probably weren't really paying attention. So after the Hendrix concert, I went to the dogs' after party, and like I said, the Hendrix was up there playing with Mitch Mitchell and No Ready, and he was playing bass, he wasn't playing guitar. And so I kind of jumped up and I started playing. He kind of looked up at me because I could play that harmonica, and then Tony Gillard, there's a jazz flute player that won the jams, and they kicked me off stage. So, and Leslie too was part of who ran the family dog, worked with Barry Fay. So there was a lot of African Americans involved in a very quiet way if you watch the documentary. I just want to put my hands up to them because, they were there.
Very cool. Very cool. I'm glad you brought that up. And Otis, as a young up-and-coming musician here in Denver, Colorado, I would imagine the family dog was a really big deal to you, where you could see these types of artists coming through town. Some of these bands obviously were already famous, some were getting famous. And as a young musician, what did the family dog mean to you?
It's just a place to hang out, girls, I wasn't very deep. And everybody looks back at history and goes, why is it the dog? Because all the cute hippie girls are there, And there's certain bands I like the Sons of Chaplin, and I like them a lot. And, Blue Cheer I thought was too loud. I didn't like Jim Morris because he never looked at people. He didn't look into the audience, so I wasn't too impressed, believe it or not. I thought Seagull's Hall was a really tight band too. I worked there sometimes, and I was there at the dock and I was taking tickets for Frank Zappa when he came. I remember that, I'm pretty sure it was Frank Zappa. I had killed someone, that was pretty outrageous. But it was, to me, it was, and then Wilson, you know, I was with some girls driving there, and we saw him walking, he was hitchhiking, so we gave him a ride to the gig. You can't eat, you know. Those are memories, but I was like a minion. I wasn't I was kind of invisible. I mean, when American Standard played there one time, I sat in and played violin. I was a horrible violin player. But I played for the first time. So I was like the low, people look at me now, but I was like the low-end guy. And I was like invisible. You know what I mean? Does that make sense what I'm saying? I wasn't really anybody. No, I mean, you know, but I was hip. I had the best clothes, but I wasn't anybody.
Paul Conley down there at the end, Lothar of the Hand people. Very cool band. And you know what? That instrument that you play called the theremin. Man, I would think you could smoke a blunt and then sit around and play that for like a 3-day weekend, and it would go by very quickly. That thing was so cool. You still play that? Yes, they would. There you go. Do you still play that?
Yeah, that works. I do. I still have what the theremin we call Lothar. I still play it. It still works great. It was made by Dr. Bob Moog. And one story I should tell people, Otis just reminded me of this, is when the band left Denver, because the band started at DU, and we moved to New York to try to make it big. We started working in clubs in Greenwich Village, and one of them was the Cafe La Go-Go in, I think that's what it was, in New York City. And it was great because one thing about being in the hand people is we did get to share the stage with a lot of great bands of that era. But at the Cafe La Go-Go, when we played there, we shared the stage with Richard Pryor, and who had not, at that period, he hadn't been on television yet, but he was, just working the stand-up clubs, and but we were all hanging out with him backstage, and he saw the theremin being played, and he said, do you mind if I went out and played the theremin? And we said, of course, go ahead. So he improvised his whole set, riffing with stuff that he came up with on the theremin, and I wish there was a film of it or something, because he was so brilliant. It's like one of those things where you had to be there, and I felt so privileged that I was there.
That is so cool. And, one of the things about the Family Dog and all of you is so interwoven with really the birth of rock and roll. Rock music had made a shift in the 60s. It became psychedelic, became electric in the 60s, as you know. And the Family Dog was right there, really, at the beginning of all of that, 1967. And I know you, Otis, and Paul as well, and Brent, all musicians. Just imagine being Canned Heat and signing away all of your publishing rights for $10,000. And then a couple of years later, you're one of the headline bands at Woodstock. You've got hits. And one of their songs is in a Geico commercial today. They literally signed away millions and millions of dollars for getting busted for weed here today. Hard to believe.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just amazing to think. And they seem to have a pretty good attitude about it, but what else can you do, right? Pretty unbelievable.
I'd like to make a comment. One, I think it was brilliant of Dan and Scott to have that part of the story, the part that involves the Denver Police and Light Squad, to have them, because they were such a part of the story, living through it as we did, and to actually find them and have them speak. Now that they were so dedicated to eradicating is now legal. Because they do say, well, we're just doing our job. And, and I say, boy, were you you're doing your job, to the nth degree. And now it's legal. But there's a poignancy that I particularly appreciate about Candide losing their publishing, because one of the lucky things that happened to me is I met an attorney in New York who told me how to set up a publishing company, which I did in '66 for the Hand People. And half of that had already been taken away by when we signed to the record label. They just said, well, we'll sign you, but you're going to have to give us half of your publishing company, which was not unusual at all, just part of the pressure that you have to face. But we were able to get our publishing rights back from them after the first year, and then this wonderful attorney who's an expert in copyright and just a brilliant attorney, he said, well, you come to me and I can show you how to set up a publishing company for $7.50, which I did. And I've never been able to have great success with it until the Chemical Brothers sampled one of our songs. But you can't imagine it. I mean, it's having your personal property taken away from you like that. So it's not just a matter of the money. It's having your rights taken from you and your control over the art that you've created.
Absolutely. Melody, what was your favorite act that played at the Family Dog? You worked there. Who was your favorite?
Well, of course it was Lothar and the Hand People. Of course it was. Well, it's so funny. Thinking back in Denver early on, we were in Denver hippies, and we were early Denver hippies. My sister Marilyn, who I never got a chance to talk, because just talking over her. But it was important to be hip. And you started smoking weed, and then you got to be pretty hippie. But there wasn't much of the scene. You'd go to the midnight movies at the Vogue, and then we would go to the Exodus, where we saw Lothar and the Hand People. And then we would go and try to make our hippie clothes and try to look like more hip than everybody else was. And then the dog came, and then you were hip, because that was my favorite act at the Family Dog. I think was Chet Helms. I think when he came to town and we met him, we couldn't imagine what that wonderful smell was. And it was the patchouli oil that we had not moved into the Denver hippie scene yet. And Chet Helms in his wonderful coat, and he smelled like patchouli oil. And then he came and stayed with us. And then the Grateful Dead came and lived with us. And Marilyn and I kept talking about our mom, who opened her arms to that whole community. And everybody was welcome, and everybody came. All of the acts were so fun, and here's what was so fun about it. When they say it held 500 people, even when it was jammed, it had a stage not as high as this, and you stood right there, and there was Hendrix, and there was, I love the Charlatans, I still do, all of those bands, but you were right there. It wasn't like these huge, we went to see Pee Wee Herman at the Paramount last night, and he was pretty fun and pretty cute, but I couldn't see his face. But at the Family Dog, everybody was right there. It's a shame that we can't have videos and that we didn't get to have the rights to the music. So that when the story about Jimmy had no, from the Doors. This is just what Paul Rubens did last night. He couldn't remember anything. He couldn't remember anything either. Isn't it amazing how old we've all gotten? Anyway, the story when he came up and fell onto the stage with that scream, it's just a shame that the music couldn't go into that that you guys couldn't get the rights for this. But yeah, but maybe something will happen, who knows, maybe we could start a who knows, you know, get some of the rights for that. But I cannot thank these two guys enough for all of these years, 50 years, all of us that had those stories and were part of the dog. And there were just a few of us that every once in a while you would see somebody, but nobody knew about it. And now, like I said to my kids when we came up, now I don't have to tell you about it because there it is. There it is.
Brent Warren, Penny Matters, you were a DU student.
Yes.
And would you ever have dreamed 50 years later you'd be starring in a film documentary premiering here at your university? I mean, who could have ever thought that, right?
No, I knew exactly. In fact,
You did? Okay.
yeah, I was psychic, and I said, I know where this is going, but I better be wearing clothes. I was hoping back then. No, well, the whole, you know, when I got in 1964 to Denver, it was a big folk singing singer. I came out of the folk world. I was telling somebody earlier that I sang with a fellow named Michael Dunn. My nickname was Maverick because James Gardner, Brett Maverick, it's a long story, but anyway, we played down at the Exodus, and I told him the highlight of my life, if you want to touch me after the show, was I got kissed on the cheek by Gail Garnett. Nobody's ever. We'll sing in the sunshine. Okay, well, anyway. Oh, but, yeah, folk is dead. But no, it was kind of fun when all of a sudden, you know, a bunch of guys said, hey, you want to try out to be a lead singer in this band? Now, we had one goal, and that was to try to write original stuff. We did, you know, bits of other people, but we tried to do it in our own way. But we said, if we're going to at least try to make it, let's do it with original style songs. And I came out of the world of theater, and so I tried to apply some theater to the Act Two, and I like to say I wasn't into hippie clothes, I wore a corduroy jacket, and one of the things I discovered is I could pour lighter fluid on my sleeves. And my goal of our guitar player was we did do a version of Mr. You're a Better Man Than I by the Yardbirds, you know, and as our end song. And his job was to drag me into such a frenzy with his fuzz-tone guitar solo that I would pour lighter fluid on my sleeves and set myself on fire, which the trick is it didn't really burn anything, and then stand backwards and jump off backwards into the crowd. So I think I invented the mosh pit, I'm not sure. Wow. But DU did that for me.
That should be on your wiki page. And you will invent the mosh pit. Make sure that makes your wiki page. Let's talk to Scott Montgomery. Scott is an art professor here at DU. And Scott's a very interesting guy that I got to know quite well over the last couple of years since we've been working on this film. Like I did anything, but I mean, you know, we had meetings and stuff like that. The art, I just think it just really pops. Especially, this is the first time I've seen it on a big screen. And the art really pops, and it just really brings you back to an era. Now that era was before your time. You were a little Scott Montgomery back then, right?
I was around. I was a real child of the 60s.
Right.
A kid in the 60s.
But what's your fascination with it today?
Well, my training is as a medievalist, but I got involved in this because I think it's significant art. When I started getting involved in it, it seemed to be under-acknowledged. It's not that far off from what I do with medieval art. I still look at how there's this iconography of style, there's still ritual spaces, the churches are different. So I don't think I really changed my field far, but I just embraced a movement of art that I think had been under-acknowledged, that I think is actually one of the more significant art movements of the second half of the 20th century.
How valuable are some of these pieces today?
That Skull and Roses poster, about 6 years ago we had an exhibit at DU here where we insured one for 50 grand.
Wait, which one?
The Grateful Dead Skull and Roses, we had one of the finest copies of the first printing.
The one that's in my kitchen? Some
Some of them are extremely valuable, but others, the family dog ones are not. So you can still, before this movie breaks big, you can still go get Denver dog posters.
150 grand in my kitchen?
I don't know if you have the first printing. 50.
Grand. Oh, so, well, I'm old. Maybe it's enough to retire on. Who knows?
Definitely get it insured
Yeah.
if it's in your kitchen. Dan Obarski down here on the end. Dan, I don't think you were even born when the family dog was around, were you?
That is correct.
That is correct, yeah. So, and you had this vision, you and Scott had this vision of wanting to do a documentary on this really cool rock club and this really cool story that saw Denver as this little cow town that hated hippies, hated the weed, the marijuana, rock music, and then has now turned into the mecca of weed in the country, as I said before. And also, with Red Rocks, the premier outdoor concert venue, maybe in the world. So in 50 years, you really, with this film, you really showed how far we've come in 50 years. So what got you interested in making this film?
Well, not to bring it back to you, Rick, but when we were young, we would listen, FM radio, classic rock was still our thing. So that was our music too. And we'd listen to you and Floorwax and other people on the radio. And we always thought a lot of our parents were from elsewhere, and we thought that nothing cool had ever happened here because nobody knew about it. No, I didn't know anybody that knew about this place. And we were suburban kids and thought it was boring and wished we were from New York or San Francisco or something else. And it wasn't until I was in my 30s I saw a picture of Jim Morrison playing at DU, and I about fell out of my chair. And there was I went searching for this family dog thing and found there was one website that a guy named Michael Selk, I don't know if he's here, but he's back there. Your website was the only piece of information out there. It was like an Angel Fire website or something, and it just had to list the concerts, and I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Nobody knew this. It was like completely unknown. It was like, somebody telling you you're a doctor or something. So I just started slowly kind of trying to find information about it, and then Scott had a poster show 5 years ago at the Byers Evans Museum, and he was the only other guy that knew anything about it. And afterwards, went up and talked to him. We said, this is important. We need to tell this story. And the fact that, it was the real deal. This wasn't like I said, this isn't like, somebody trying to be San Francisco. That was what was going on. And the fact that it's not known, we wanted to correct that. And I have to say, we wanted to tell both sides of the story. We heard all about John Gray. We didn't get a hold of him until we were deep into the movie, we believe you, but he was terrible. But at the same time, what we did, when we met John Gray, he came down. This was really interesting, because, we kind of inherited this culture, kind of like you said. Nobody really tells that side of the story. And John Gray came down, he's 85 years old, and he shows up, and he's got a scrapbook this big. All those materials you saw, photos and articles, those were from him. That was from his scrapbook. He came down and he wanted to tell his side of the story, and it was that period was as meaningful to him as it was to anybody else. And as we went through the letters, and we interviewed at her office there on First, and Nancy's in the back, shook a scrapbook into the back, and she's scanning all of this stuff, saying, oh my God, we gotta get every letter in here. And you're looking at these letters, you're like, oh, there was another side to this. And we said, we really need to tell this. And we think it made it a better story because it wasn't just a bad dude, even though he may have been a bad dude. we were like, we got to tell the whole story of the dog here. And I think we did because we showed it to John Gray and Jerry Kennedy. We went up to John's house, and they were really happy with it. So after you guys were happy and they were happy, we were happy.
And hopefully you're happy.
Yeah, hopefully you're happy. Anybody has questions for anybody on the panel? Yeah, let go this. Okay, yeah, you can say anything you want.
Give the black man the microphone for a second. I want to say two things, Mr. Larson. I'm just, all the people, and I know there's a few sitting out there, that were there at the time, would you please stand up? Because they're like Junior, and I see Panetta. Stand up, come on, all the people at that time. Junior? You know? Yeah. I think that's important, you know. The other thing I want to say, the Lothar and Hand people, that band, and Tommy Bolin, were probably two of the advanced, most hippest bands that came out of America. It affected a lot of people. And they were that's happening.
I think you should mention Kenny Passarelli too, who was featured. Yeah, I have a good friend of Kenny, and I know you are too, Otis. And for those of you that don't know Kenny Passarelli, one of the great rock bass players ever, he was in Barnstorm with Joe Walsh. He co-wrote Rocky Mountain Way with Joe Walsh, played with Elton John, and did a lot of work up at the Caribou Ranch. Kenny's a total legend in this town as well. All right, you got a question back there, sir? Who came up with the name The Family Dog?
And how much did the ticket cost?
How much was the ticket?
$2.50. Chet Helms brought the family dog with him from San Francisco. And this is kind of an interesting little sidelight that after the family dog closed, and God, that kind of hurt me, the end of the movie kind of was painful, wasn't it? But he went back and we were in touch with him. My brother Roy was in touch with Chet a lot. But right after he left, because Associated Rubber was the company that we were at and that my dad was running. And by the way, we picked the Grateful Dead up at the airport in the Associated Rubber truck and drove to City Park. But after he got back, he asked us if we would mind if he named his next venture the Associated Rubber Dog. Which is really funny, and nothing very much happened with that.
To answer the question about the family dog, the name came from San Francisco. Alton Kelly, Gloria Castells, some of the original founders of the family dog. Their dog had recently been expired by a vehicle, I think. It was assisted in death by a car. And so they named the venture after the family dog. And then the Denver one became just an extension.
Other questions? I have a microphone here.
Harry Tuft, the great Harry Tuft.
Thank you. A story about Barry. Barry came to me when he was booking the family dog, and he said that he wanted to start promoting, and he had a chance to bring Frank Zappa to the dog, and would I co-promote that show with him? So I said, sure, why not? And I actually picked up Zappa, expecting some wild, freaked out person, and got one of the more sane individuals who, as we went through 5 points, asked about the situation, the blacks in Denver, and rehearsed his band for several hours. After the show, he made his band count the tickets to make sure that what was on the manifest was actually accurate. And then Barry and I